Welcome to Brainstoryum. I'm Anna Tizard, award-winning dreampunk and deeply weird fantasy author. And yes, that's me and my fiction that's deeply weird. Explore and imagine with me the most unexpected story ideas using the surrealist word game of Exquisite Corpse. Find out more and join in at annatizard.com. This is a storytelling challenge unlike anything you've tried before. Hello, imaginative people. I'm Anna Tizard, and this is episode 65 of Brainstoryum. I hope you're ready for some weird and wild story ideas, because today's show is full of them in this special episode, reflecting on a live game session I was lucky enough to be a part of. That's right, I mentioned last time that I was getting really excited about a live upcoming storytelling event in Brighton where I live, and I was building up to hosting a round of Exquisite Corpse with that very audience, some of whom are actual professional storytellers. The logical part of my brain said I should be nervous. I only felt excited in the build-up until I got there. And when I walked in, when I stood there on the little stage area they have, I knew that anything could happen. When you're mixing other people's words, you really don't have any control over what is coming up. I had no pause button, no pot of green tea, but it was enormous fun. Everyone got into it, and the results were, of course, completely bizarre and got us all thinking about some story ideas. At the end of the session, I announced my challenge to write a complete short story based on some of the results of that evening. At this, there were some baffled and slightly disbelieving stares, as you'd expect, I guess. So today's show is going to be a bit different without the socks of destiny, but in fact, there will be more Exquisite Corpses, more story brainstorms, and as promised, one completed short story which I've written based on some of the results of that evening. And it is almost startlingly creepy and dark, so be warned. As ever, these weird word combinations prompted me to explore characters and situations that I would not otherwise dream up on my own. And I hope it does the same for you. Now, before we get going with the Exquisite Corpse results, I have some ideas to share from my listeners who responded to the writing prompt I suggested from the last show, the serendipitous theatre. Eric Montgomery said, "When serendipity turns sinister, the world's luckiest troupe unravels in a descent into madness, mayhem, and complete darkness, where fortune's opposite takes centre stage." Aha, you flipped it. In a way, I suppose, stories are built on conflict. So when presented with serendipity, maybe it was inevitable that at least some people would flip it, because you've got to try and find that juicy core of a story and how to pull that out into something suggestive of more. Nick Vraker said, "The amphitheatre was the highlight of the tour and the end to her plans. Just a small sacrifice of a few dozen lives to summon an old god. But somehow the stars didn't align like she had meant them to. The lights had turned back on and the audience was already shuffling out." Aha, so another flip, and the serendipity here is meant to be there, but it doesn't happen. It doesn't work out as expected. This feels dark and intriguing. And a flip of another kind came from the self-named village idiot, who said, now showing at the Serendipitous Theatre, Les Joyables, or Joyables. I can't pronounce that. I think it's a made-up word, a made-up French word, and of course it is the polar opposite of a very well-known musical. Very funny. It did make me laugh. So thank you, Village Idiot, and Nick Vrakar and Eric Montgomery for your ideas. Right. Well, now is when I would usually turn to the Socks of Destiny to pull out some new ideas. But as it is, I already have these very bizarre exquisite corpses for you, generated by the wonderful audience of Brighton Telltales on the 2nd of October. So let's go. The first one was the tequila-soaked young girl destroyed a universe because of the revolting fortune teller. I say the first. What's happening is I will not be reading out all of the exquisite corpses of that evening because there were loads. I've picked out several and we'll do story brainstorms based on those, followed by a short story. So this is simply the first one that made me go, let me just see if I can do something with that. So let me just read that out again. The tequila-soaked young girl destroyed a universe because of the revolting fortune teller. Now, I like this one partly because, as some audience members immediately picked up, a revolting fortune teller might be a fortune teller who is revolting, or it might be the fortune they've told which is revolting. Personally, I think the latter is more interesting. And the image of this young girl drenched with alcohol, being underage, she might not have drunk the tequila herself, or we'd hope, but has been caught in the line of fire in some raucous party. And she destroys a universe rather than allow the revolting fortunes that have just been predicted to go ahead. First of all, what could that be? What could be worse than complete destruction? And what kind of terrifying powers does this little girl have? Standing there, soaked in tequila, it's like an image that tells of the debauchery that has just occurred and which she is about to put an end to. Sometimes the creepiest ghosts are the little girl ghosts, and sometimes the best destroyer of universes will be a little girl too. A tantrum? Or an act that comes from a strong sense of justice, because children often have a strong sense of what they think is right or wrong. And what was that party about that she's just torn through? Maybe word got around about this terrible fortune that was predicted, and people figured, let's just party until the world ends. And then she steps in and ends it. Well, that's a creepy one. So the next one I have on my list was, actually, this is one that provoked very different opinions. The shimmering politician moved to the fashionably late new city. Now the strong and differing reactions that were provoked by this invoked in the audience really got me interested. Some people were really put off by this one straight away, feeling like it was a declaration of some smug, self-satisfied politician. Ooh, aren't I great? I'm actually shimmering. And look, I've moved to a swanky, fashionably late new city. But that only made me look at it more because of this reaction. That maybe it's the sense of conflict that drew me in, which is the bedrock of all story, of course. And the more we looked at this one and picked it apart, there were others who pointed out that the shimmering politician might be a hologram. They're not even real. And then there was the question of, what is a fashionably late new city? And how can a new city be late? The idea of a city which has appeared out of nowhere is particularly intriguing to me, a new city. Well, that's one interpretation of new. But fashionably late? Maybe it's always nighttime. That seems like the basis for a curious fantasy world or alternative reality. Would there be more crime if it was always night? More parties? People would probably work quite chaotic hours because if you can't differentiate between night and day, well, how do you structure your day, your week? The perpetual darkness might have strange effects on people too, on their psychology. I'm going to return to this, so bookmark these thoughts. Next up, a very, very weird one. The delicate void drank tea with the scary kangaroo. A void drinking tea. What's not to like? I think actually I'm going to pour my green tea. I may not be pulling words out of the socks of destiny, but why not? Okay. Right, so the delicate void drank tea with the scary kangaroo. Emptiness in a black suit sits at a small round white table. The teapot rises seemingly of its own accord, and the golden brown liquid inside pours an arc into the cup. Is it moved by an invisible hand or by nothingness itself? The cup hovers towards the gap where the person's head should be. The cup tips and the tea flows down, disappearing into thin air. The suit remains dry and clean and filled with nothing, a void. Opposite this non-entity in a suit sits an even more disturbing figure. A man with scraggy ginger brown hair, also in a suit, but many times bigger. His legs under the table are as thick as tree trunks, pure muscle. He is well known to be a kickboxing champion, which has got him his nickname, the Kangaroo. And he is a thug of the worst kind. What are they doing, these two characters, calmly drinking tea in a quaint cafe in this touristy side of town? A bargain is being struck. Is it anything to do with the city of perpetual night? Or the universe being brought to an end by a tequila-drenched young girl? I can't help but want to try and join these things up a little bit. But let's move on to yet another exquisite corpse. We will get there. This one is the Velvet Raven watched tennis with the hardiest giraffe. I have to admit there were a few giraffes that evening. Inexplicable, but the bit I love most of this one is the Velvet Raven. How gorgeous is that? It could almost be a clothes brand. Lovely coat. Where'd you get that? It's a Velvet Raven. Nice. Some of the audience in the night picked up that these could be code names for thugs. More thugs making a deal while they're at a tennis match. Why not? It's the last place the police would expect dirty deals to be made. The audience are all concentrating on the game. They don't care who's sitting next to them. And it's all so civilised. The hardiest giraffe may get a few glares because he's so tall, as per his namesake. he gets a good view of the game. But maybe, to avoid unwanted attention, he sits in the back row. And this is the perfect excuse, in fact, for sitting so far back and becoming a bit more unnoticeable for it. Deals, deals, what's going on? The void and the kangaroo drinking tea. The velvet raven, a beautiful, sleek woman dressed all in black, murmuring surreptitiously to the tall guy in the back row of the tennis. Something is afoot. It's bigger than just one bargain. It could be bigger than just one story. Next one up, the vagrant gorgonzola. There's always one that is just completely mad. The vagrant gorgonzola jumped into a deep well in order to save the hesitant shoelace. The hesitant shoelace. I love that so much. And the idea of clothes that have consciousness and a magic of their own. I think we've come across that before. Some kind of cloak, perhaps. It might have been a reluctant cloak or something like that. I'm not sure. But the hesitant shoelace, maybe it wasn't originally a shoelace. It was meant to be something else, and it has that awareness. That's why it's hesitant. It's imbued with magic and is in disguise as a shoelace. And it feels drawn to the deep underground underworld where it was first made, crocheted tightly into being by a witch, in between stirring her cauldron. It was meant to be thicker, part of a fabric belt, maybe. But then the witch splashed it accidentally with the potion while she was dishing some of it out into a bottle for a visitor, a client who paid for said potion. The lace awakened with this magic. And who knows what this potion actually did? Was it potentially deadly? How powerful was it? Did it lend a consciousness to things? But in that moment, the little string shook awake, and it took its chance to jump off the witch's side table and hook itself into the shoes of the visitor, who turned and left. What might happen next? With new consciousness, with an awakening, comes questions, curiosity, and yearnings that can't easily be fulfilled. For that is the price of awareness, isn't it? And sensing that there is more than being just what you are. You always want more. In some sense, we are always seeking something, seeking answers. And so the hesitant shoelace didn't fall down the well. It crawled and slithered, hunting the echoing darkness for an idea. But why, as the Exquisite Corpse goes, a vagrant gorgonzola, a cheesy stranger, an ex-cheesemaker or cheese counter salesperson who's lost their job, why did they jump into a well in order to save the hesitant shoelace? Well, they might have seen the value of this little string. They too were hunting for something more, so desperately looking for magic now that since they'd lost their business selling cheeses and lived on the streets. That is a weird one. I like it though. So, I think it's time for my short story, which combines some of the exquisite corpses that I've talked about today. I shall reveal these at the end, but I think you'll probably recognise some bits and pieces along the way, even though I realise I've thrown so many ideas at you in the last several minutes. This is the city of Perpetual Night. It was a Thursday when the politician exited this world. People had stopped believing in him. As a result, he had begun to fade. He came home to his empty flat as usual. He stood in front of the hallway mirror, sighing at the crinkled bump of his tie that poked out from his grey suit. He tucked his finger into it and froze. His face was barely there. Just a ghostly hologram of himself stared back, wide-mouthed, a shimmering reflection. Who was he? Still staring, fixated, it was only force of habit that curled his finger around the tie, and he tugged until it came loose. With a soft rumple, the empty suit collapsed onto the floor. Then it too was gone. Somewhere beyond here was a city that was steeped in night. It was a place where people went sometimes when this world no longer clung to them. In weary party dresses, broken sequins and untucked shirts over jeans, they slumped over bars, drinking away a fierce nostalgia. If you asked them what they were doing here, they might wave you off with a mirthless laugh. There was much they couldn't remember in this place where time had stopped. Not quite stopped. The city, or something underneath it, oscillated back and forth over a 6-hour period, drawing close to the dawn, then swinging back again towards midnight and the dying hours of the day before. The truth was, those hours had died long ago. Here, opposite a thin, inky stream, see that pub? Over the arched doorway, a string of yellowed light bulbs dimmed, flickering. Always at this time, as the first smudges of dawn began to break the horizon, the bulbs fizzled, ready to pop and die. The second to last one on the right-hand side buzzed like a trapped neon fly. Then the world swooped back on itself with the infinitesimal shudder felt only by those drunk enough or close enough to sleep for their minds to touch the edges of the underlying dream that kept this place alive, if alive was the right word. For the people who occupied this city had decided long ago that real life was not what they wanted. They abandoned their belief in the ordinary rules and responsibilities of the daylight world and gave themselves up to the night, to drinking and to restless oblivion. No one thrived exactly. The endless night allowed them to subsist, to flicker on like the lights of the city that beat their feeble challenge against the perpetual darkness. A place of no death. Inside the pub, green fairy lights prickled the edges of the exposed brick walls. A woman with soft, mouse-like ears hunched over a piano, her hands meandering over the keys as she chased the tail of some half-remembered tune, never quite catching up with it. The barman wiped his tea towel around glasses that were already clean, staring through black windows at nothing. Small huddles of people murmured over wonky wooden tables or said nothing at all. Further in, under another archway, a slightly lighter area opened up. Under the brighter glow of newer ceiling lights, a woman at a corner table munched at a bagel, looking almost pleased with her lunch, or midnight snack. Against the opposite wall, in one of the cushioned booths, sat the ex-kickboxing champion, the man they called the Kangaroo, his knuckled knees pushing the table from underneath, almost wrenching it from its nailed-down base on the floor. It was not possible, even from a distance, to take in all of him at once. Each muscled, trunk-like limb was enough to scatter your gaze elsewhere, but the least easy to look at was his heavy-browed, mocking face. So let's turn our attention to the one sitting opposite him. An empty grey suit, or so it would seem. The politician. His worried face flickered, no more than a ghost of a thought that was already half forgotten. Who am I? How did I get here? His voice was a hollow sound, a poor radio transmission. The kangaroo snarled, the only kind of smile he had. What do you believe? He barked. I don't know. You were a politician, for stars' sake. What attracted you to such a disgusting career? You must have believed in something. The man scowled, betrayed that this didn't raise his opinion of the suit opposite him in the slightest. The freedom of the individual? The kangaroo threw back his head and laughed, full of a dry, throaty sneer. Then he leaned forwards and, as if nothing had passed between them, began to pour the tea. It was a hefty teapot, and the tea cosy was stained and slightly torn around the hole where the spout poked through. For several seconds there was nothing but the sound of trickling fluid. The politician stared, thinking how little substance he had, even compared to the tea. The kangaroo raised one ginger eyebrow. What you had has been taken from you, or else left behind. You stopped believing, you stopped clinging. That's how people end up here. The ones that knew you no longer cared for the things you said. Maybe you betrayed some people, he added, warming to his made-up story with a nudge of his massive shoulder as he set down the teapot and took a long, slow slurp. But a betrayal not bad enough for them to remember. No one has kept you in their minds firmly enough. Therefore, you are nothing in that world. Here, he spread a hand, you are almost a something. But if you want to grow a body again, become solid again, even here where no one knows you and where night never ends, I can help. The question is, how badly do you want a job? The kangaroo smiled then, and the politician was reminded with a wave of horror why it was not good to look directly at this man's face. What sort of work? The politician asked, but the pang of sickness in his soul, what was left of it, told him he did not want to know. Work is work, said the kangaroo, although what I'll show you is more about give and take. He leaned his elbow on the table, which creaked under the pressure. What people can give is what you take. In a city that is always fashionably late, people are careless with their life force. What you can gather up, you gather into yourself and make yourself new. That sounds like killing? The kangaroo let out a low hiss. He grabbed the neck of the politician, what he could find of it, and squeezed. The politician cringed inside his too big suit, but did not struggle. It was a shock of relief to feel the impact of his own body, somehow that bit more solid under the unrelenting grip of this hulk of a man. For a moment, he was almost alive again. But for that one beat, that flicker in time, he knew wholeheartedly that he would not betray anyone ever again, and would choose death over his so-called work. The grey suit slumped onto the chair. The kangaroo murmured into the empty space, "I've been wondering what might happen if I did that." And so the politician dissolved into the night. In the city of perpetual darkness, the night lived on, with or without him. But if you see a string of light bulbs flickering over a pub doorway in the shape of a smile, or if the ever-black stream trickling under the footbridge opposite the pub catches those lights in a wink, well, it might be him. a piece of him, a long-forgotten remnant pressed tightly down under the years and the pressure of his tie, now released. Well, that was creepy, wasn't it? And so that was how the shimmering politician moved to the fashionably late new city, but also how the delicate void drank tea with the scary kangaroo. And I wonder if the city of Perpetual Night might have something to do with the tequila-soaked young girl who destroyed a universe because of the revolting fortune teller. Maybe there was a part of it that didn't quite get destroyed, a remnant that was this city, trapped in darkness, trapped in time. My stories seem to be getting darker of late. I don't know if it's the season, the closeness of Halloween, or something else. Who knows? The imagination does what it will. Then again, the imagination will happily take cues and clues from the prompts you feed it to take you to places you'd never dream of on your own. That's the magic of collaborating and messing around with randomness while maintaining an attitude of wonder. I want to thank everyone who played Exquisite Corpse with me on 2nd of October at Brighton Telltales, and those whose words wait in the socks of destiny, ready to find their destiny and become part of another adventure into the imagination. So please tune in next time, subscribe to the channel wherever you listen, subscribe to my email list for updates and for the first book in my series, of course. And in the meantime, if you do have a story idea that you can summarise and send to me based on one of the exquisite corpses in today's show, do get in touch at annatizard.com and hit the contact button. It might be a revolting fortune teller, a hesitant shoelace, or a velvet raven, whatever that means. You choose. Until next time, go forth and be inspired. I hope you enjoyed today's Brainstoryum. You can find out more about Exquisite Corpse and my series, The Book of Exquisite Corpse, at annatizard.com. Subscribe to my e-newsletter and you'll get Volume 1 for free. And while you're there, why not submit a few words to the Socks of Destiny on my play page? You may inspire me or inspire yourself to write a unique new story. See you next time.